For the 10th time, her name flashed across his phone. Isabella. With a contemptuous swipe of his thumb, Damien Blackwood silenced the call. His focus cemented on the presentation before him. He was on the verge of the biggest deal of his life, a multi-billion-dollar partnership that would catapult Blackwood Corp into the stratosphere. He couldn't be bothered with his wife's trivialities, what the housekeeper needed, or a problem with the caterer for one of her charity luncheons. He saw her as a beautiful, quiet accessory to his life, a masterpiece he'd acquired but rarely stopped to admire. He believed he was securing his future in that boardroom, never imagining that the woman he was so carelessly ignoring held the absolute power to shatter his world with a single sentence. What happens when the world's most underestimated wife decides she's done being invisible? The silence in the penthouse was a living entity. It breathed in the vast, empty spaces between the minimalist Italian furniture and clung to the cold floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park. For Isabella Rossi Blackwood, this silence was the soundtrack of her marriage. It was a silence paid for by her husband's relentless ambition, a quiet curated by a staff she rarely saw, and a loneliness she had learned to wear like a bespoke Chanel jacket, impeccably tailored and hiding everything underneath. She held her phone, the screen dark, her reflection looking back at her. Her call log showed 11 attempts to reach her husband, Damien. 11 calls sent into the void. Each one had been more urgent than the last. She had started the day with a simple text. Damien, I need to speak with you urgently. It's about my grandfather. No reply. An hour later, she called. The call went to voicemail after 2 rings, a clear, deliberate rejection. She tried again. Same result. Her calls became more frantic as the morning wore on. The news from the family estate in Geneva wasn't just bad. It was seismic. It was a world-altering event that required her, and by extension, her husband, to act. But Damien was unreachable, cocooned in the world that mattered to him, the world of power, money, and prestige. Inside the glass-walled conference room of Blackwood Corp, Damien was at the peak of his power. He paced before a holographic display, his custom Tom Ford suit fitting him like a second skin. His voice was a low, confident baritone, mesmerizing the investors from a Japanese tech conglomerate. Blackwood Corp doesn't just build smart cities, he declared, his hand slicing through the air. We build the future of human interaction. We are on the precipice of securing a revolutionary energy patent. But to do that, we need a partner with vision. A partner with legacy. His phone buzzed on the polished mahogany table. Isabella. Chloe Sterling, his sharp, ambitious vice president, noticed his glance. Her red dress was a slash of color in the otherwise monochromatic room. Everything all right, Damien? She murmured her voice, just for him. He waved a dismissive hand, not breaking eye contact with the lead investor. Just my wife. Probably a crisis over the color of the new hydrangeas for the garden. Chloe's lips curved into a smirk. She had always viewed Isabella as a relic, a beautiful but useless artifact from an older world. She was the one who worked alongside Damien, who understood the pressure, the kill-or-be-killed nature of their business. Isabella, in her eyes, was just the woman who planned his dinner parties. Some of us deal with empires, others with flower beds. Chloe whispered her comment, a drop of poison, meant to bond them together in their shared superiority. Damien's chest puffed out slightly. He loved that. He loved being seen as the man who dealt in empires. It was the identity he had constructed for himself brick by painstaking brick. He had come from nothing, a scholarship kid who'd clawed his way to the top. He had married Isabella Rossi 7 years ago, enchanted by her quiet grace and the aura of old-world European class that clung to her. He hadn't known the extent of her family's wealth. The Rossi name was respected, but notoriously private. He just knew she was the perfect elegant piece to complete the picture of Damien Blackwood, the self-made titan. He had provided her with a life of unimaginable luxury. What could she possibly need from him so urgently? Whatever it was, it couldn't be more important than this deal. Nothing was more important than this deal. This deal was his ticket to the inner circle, the rarefied air inhabited by the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts of the modern age. And the key to that world was the Metropolitan Legacy Gala that evening. It wasn't just the biggest charity event of the year. It was a hunting ground. The gala was sponsored by the Ethelgard Foundation, a notoriously private and powerful philanthropic organization. For months, Damien had been trying to get a meeting with its leadership. The foundation was sitting on the very energy patent he needed, a revolutionary technology they had acquired, and were looking for the right corporate partner to develop. The head of the foundation was a complete enigma, known only by the initials AR. No one had ever seen them in public. Tonight, AR was rumored to be making their first public appearance. Securing even 5 minutes with this person would be the coup of a lifetime. It would validate everything he had ever worked for. He silenced his phone again, the vibration a minor annoyance, and turned his full charismatic attention back to the investors. Gentlemen, Blackwood Corp is not just an investment. It is a dynasty in the making. Back in the silent penthouse, Isabella put her phone down. The 11th call had been answered not by Damien, but by his voicemail. A cold, automated voice for a cold, automated life. She walked over to the window, her hand resting on the cool glass. The view of the city was dizzying, a concrete jungle of ambition and dreams. It was Damien's world. He had brought her here, installed her in this gilded cage, and then promptly forgotten she had wings. A tear, hot and sharp, traced a path down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of fury. The news from Geneva had settled in her bones, a heavy, cold weight. Her grandfather, Alessandro Rossi. The patriarch, the titan. The man who had built a quiet empire based on integrity and innovation had passed away that morning. He was the founder and silent chairman of the Ethelgard Foundation. His final letter to her, delivered by his solicitor via a secure channel, had been clear. With his passing, the full responsibility, the title of chairwoman and the control of its vast resources now fell to her. She was AR, Alessandra Rossi, the name she used in that world, a tribute to her grandfather. He had been preparing her for this her entire life, not with business lessons, but with lessons in character, in empathy, in seeing the value of people over profit. Her urgent calls to Damien hadn't been about a family tragedy in the abstract. They had been a final test, a final hope that the man she had married, the man she had once loved, would be her partner in this monumental transition. She had wanted to tell him to face this new chapter with him, but he hadn't answered. He had dismissed her grief, her inheritance, her entire identity as an inconvenience. She wiped the tear away with the back of her hand. Her expression hardened. The quiet, graceful wife was gone, replaced by the woman her grandfather had raised her to be. Damien wanted to meet the head of the Ethelgard Foundation. Fine. He would get his wish. She turned from the window and walked toward her dressing room, a place Damien called her sanctuary, but which had always felt more like a beautifully decorated prison cell. Tonight its doors would open and she would walk out, not as Mrs. Blackwood, but as herself. And the world, especially her husband, was about to find out exactly who that was. Damien's energy was electric as he burst through the penthouse doors late that afternoon. The deal with the Japanese investors was provisionally signed contingent on one thing securing the Ethelgard patent. The Gala was no longer just an opportunity, it was the final battlefield. "Isabella." He called out, his voice echoing in the marble foyer. He loosened his tie, his mind already racing, planning his approach, his pitch, his conquest. "We need to leave in 2 hours. I had a dress sent over from Dior. It's in your dressing room. Black. Sophisticated. You need to look the part tonight." Isabella emerged from the hallway. Not from her dressing room, but from her private study, a room Damien rarely entered. She was already dressed, but not in the designer gown he had sent. She wore a simple, elegant silk blouse and tailored trousers. Her hair was pulled back, and she was holding a leather-bound folio. Her face was serene, but her eyes held a new, unfamiliar light. It was a cold, clear light, like a winter dawn. "I won't be wearing the Dior Damien," she said, her voice even and calm. It was a stark contrast to his frenetic energy. Damien stopped, irritated. This was not the time for games. "Don't be difficult, Isabella. Tonight is the most important night of my career. I need you to be perfect." "The black dress is perfect." "It's a beautiful dress," she conceded, placing the folio on the large mahogany table in the center of the room. "But it's not suitable for my role this evening." He laughed, a short, incredulous bark. "Your role? Your role is to be my wife. To smile, look stunning, and charm the ancient wives of my potential business partners. That's it. Now please go get ready." He started to walk past her, but she didn't move. "My grandfather died this morning, Damien." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Damien froze. He turned to look at her, really look at her, for the first time that day. He saw the faint redness around her eyes, the subtle tension in her jaw. A flicker of guilt pierced his armor of ambition. He had ignored her calls. All 11 of them. "Izzy, I'm sorry." He stammered the words, feeling clumsy and inadequate. "I didn't know. My phone was... I was in the meeting of a lifetime." "I know," she said, and the simple affirmation cut deeper than any accusation. "You always are." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, his mind trying to recalibrate. A death in the family. This was a complication. Okay. Look, we can cancel. We'll stay home. We'll make arrangements to fly to Geneva tomorrow. It was the proper thing to say, the husbandly thing. But even as he said it, his stomach churned at the thought of missing the gala, missing his chance at AR. "There's no need to cancel," Isabella replied, her composure unwavering. "I still have to be there. And so do you. You wouldn't want to miss it." Damien was confused. "What are you talking about? Your grandfather just died. Why would you want to go to a party?" "It isn't a party for me. It's a responsibility," she said, tapping the folio. "Alessandro's passing has accelerated some things. There are duties I must now formally assume." He still wasn't understanding. He saw her grief as a logistical problem, an emotional detour from his path to glory. "Look, whatever it is, it can wait. A night of mourning is the least you can do. It's what's expected. What's expected of me is no longer your concern," she said, the coldness in her voice now unmistakable. She turned and walked toward her dressing room. I will be ready to leave in an hour, but I will be taking my own car. Damien stood alone in the vast living room, baffled and annoyed. Her grief was making her irrational dramatic. He'd apologize properly later, buy her a diamond bracelet to make up for his inattention. But tonight, he had a mission. He would go to the gala, find AR, and secure his destiny. He'd deal with his wife's strange mood later. He assumed she would eventually put on the Dior dress and come to her senses, sliding back into the role he had assigned her. An hour later, as Damien's Bentley was pulling up to the front of their building, another car, a sleek, understated but obviously armored Maybach, pulled up behind it. He watched, puzzled, as Isabella exited the building. She had not put on the Dior. Instead, she wore a custom-made Armani gown in a deep sapphire blue. The color was regal commanding. Around her neck was a single breathtaking piece of jewelry, a diamond and sapphire necklace he had never seen before. It wasn't flashy. It was regal, a piece that spoke of generations of wealth, not a single season's bonus. Her hair was styled in an elegant chignon, and her makeup was subtle but flawless. She didn't look like a grieving granddaughter. She didn't look like his quiet, unassuming wife. She looked like a queen. A man in a dark suit, clearly a professional security detail, opened the door of the Maybach for her. She didn't even glance at Damien or his Bentley. She simply got into her car, and it pulled away smoothly into the Manhattan traffic, heading downtown. Damien was left standing on the sidewalk, a storm of confusion and anger brewing inside him. Who was this woman? Where did that car come from? And that necklace? It must have been worth more than his first-year profits. Chloe called him, then her voice crisp and impatient. Damien. Where are you? The pre-gala reception is starting. Everyone who's anyone is here. I'm on my way, he snapped, getting into his car. He slammed the door shut, his mind reeling. For the first time in their 7 years of marriage, he had the unsettling feeling that he didn't know his wife at all. A part of him was furious at her defiance, but another smaller part was unnerved. It was the feeling a chess player gets when his opponent makes a move so unexpected, so outside the known rules of the game, that he realizes he might not be playing against a novice after all. He pushed the thought aside. He had more important things to worry about. He had to find AR. His entire future depended on it. The Carlisle Hotel was transformed. A river of black-tie guests flowed up the grand staircase, their diamonds and laughter echoing in the gilded hall. This was Damien's natural habitat. He moved through the crowd with the predatory grace of a shark, a glass of champagne in one hand, his eyes scanning, assessing hunting. Chloe, a vision in emerald green, was at his side. The CEO of Omnicorp is by the bar, she murmured. And I saw Jacob Stern, the private equity king, talking to a senator near the terrace. The target, however, is nowhere to be seen. The target was AR. The whispers about the head of the Ethelgard Foundation were everywhere. Some said AR was a reclusive tech billionaire who had cashed out and turned to philanthropy. Others whispered it was an old European aristocrat. The mystery only added to the foundation's allure. Its sponsorship of the gala was a statement of immense power. They'll be here, Damien said, his confidence a carefully constructed facade. Isabella's dramatic exit had shaken him more than he cared to admit. Someone this powerful doesn't sponsor an event like this and not show up. They'll make an entrance. He saw a few familiar faces, rivals he'd bested, allies he'd cultivated. They greeted him with the requisite mix of professional courtesy and thinly veiled envy. He was Damien Blackwood, the man of the hour, the one whose name was on everyone's lips. He was exactly where he wanted to be. Then he saw her. Isabella was standing near a marble column, speaking with a man he recognized instantly. Marcus Thorne, the formidable silver-haired chairman of the Federal Reserve. They weren't making small talk. Isabella was speaking, and Thorne was listening with an intensity and deference Damien had never seen him afford anyone, let alone himself. Damien's smile tightened. What was she doing talking to Marcus Thorne? He started towards them, a possessive proprietary anger rising in him. Chloe put a hand on his arm. "Careful, Damien," she warned. "Don't make a scene. People are watching." He brushed her off. He was her husband. He had every right. As he approached, he saw Isabella laugh at something Thorne said. A genuine, confident laugh he hadn't heard in years. She looked radiant, poised, and utterly at ease in this world of power he thought was exclusively his. "Isabella, darling," he said, his voice a little too loud, forcing his way into the conversation. He placed a hand on the small of her back, a gesture of ownership. "I was wondering where you'd gone." Isabella didn't flinch. She simply turned her head slightly, her sapphire eyes meeting his. The coldness in them was startling. "Damien, I was just catching up with an old friend. You know Marcus, of course." Thorne turned his expression unreadable. "Blackwood," he said, his nod curt. There was no warmth in it. "My deepest condolences on your loss, Isabella. Alessandro was a giant, a mentor, and a dear friend. The world is poorer for his absence." Damien was stunned into silence. Marcus Thorne knew Isabella's grandfather, knew him well enough to call him a mentor. "Thank you, Marcus," Isabella said, her voice warm for the first time that evening. "He always spoke very highly of you." Damien felt like an intruder at his own party. He tried to recover, to assert his place. "Yes, a terrible loss. We're all devastated. I was just telling Isabella she shouldn't have come tonight, but she insisted on being brave." He tried to frame it as her emotional whim, painting himself as the concerned husband. Isabella's smile was thin and sharp as a razor's edge. "Bravery has nothing to do with it. Some duties can't be postponed." She turned her back on Damien, returning her full attention to Thorne. "Marcus, we must discuss the Foundation's new arts endowment next week. My grandfather left some very specific instructions. The Ethelgard Foundation." The name hit Damien like a physical blow. He stared at his wife, at the impossible connection being drawn in front of him. No, it was impossible. A coincidence. She must be on one of the Foundation's junior boards, a position he'd probably secured for her years ago and forgotten about. A little charity work to keep the wives of important men busy. That had to be it. Thorne nodded. "Of course, Madam Chairwoman. My office will be at your disposal." Madam Chairwoman. The words echoed in the sudden roaring silence of Damien's mind. He felt the blood drain from his face. Chloe had come up behind him, having heard the entire exchange. Her perfectly made-up face was a mask of disbelief. Isabella finally turned to face them both. She looked at Damien, and for the first time, he saw a glimmer of what looked like pity in her eyes. "Damien, you look pale," she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "Perhaps you should get some air." She then looked at Chloe, her gaze sweeping over the other woman from head to toe. It was not a jealous glare, but something far more chilling, a dismissal. It was the look one gives to a piece of furniture that is about to be replaced. Without another word, Isabella excused herself from Thorne, and glided away into the crowd, which seemed to part for her as if by magic. Heads turned. Whispers followed in her wake. She wasn't just another beautiful woman in a designer gown anymore. A palpable aura of power now surrounded her, an invisible current that Damien, for all his ambition, had never been able to generate. Chloe finally spoke, her voice a strained whisper. "What the hell was that, Madam Chairwoman?" "It's a mistake. It has to be." But Damien knew it wasn't. The pieces were slotting together in his mind with horrifying speed. The secrecy of her family. The calls he ignored. The Maybach. The necklace. Her strange confidence. Her words. "It's not suitable for my role this evening." He had spent months, poured millions into research and lobbying, trying to get the attention of the mysterious AR. He had fantasized about this meeting, about the moment he would finally stand face to face with the person who held the key to his empire. All this time he had been sleeping next to them. He had ignored their calls. He had told them what to wear. He had treated them like a decorative object. The room suddenly felt hot, suffocating. The champagne in his hand tasted like ash. He watched his wife across the room now in conversation with a senator and a tech CEO he'd been trying to meet for a year. They were all listening to her. She was the center of that universe, and he was on the outside looking in for the very first time. The hunter had just realized he was the prey. The hum of the crowd began to quiet as David Calloway, the city's beloved philanthropist and the evening's master of ceremonies, tapped the microphone on the grand stage. A cascade of light from the chandeliers above bathed the ballroom in a warm golden glow. Damien stood frozen in place, a statue of dread amidst the sea of oblivious elites. Chloe was beside him. Her earlier confidence shattered, replaced by a nervous, predatory stillness. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here tonight." Calloway's voice boomed rich and inviting. "Your generosity tonight will change the lives of thousands of children at the New York Children's Hospital. We have shattered all previous fundraising records, and that is thanks in no small part to the unprecedented, truly historic contribution of our main sponsor." A ripple of intrigued murmurs went through the room. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Damien's heart hammered against his ribs. He felt a desperate, insane hope that he had misunderstood everything, that it was all a bizarre, cruel coincidence, that Madam Chairwoman was an honorary title for some minor subcommittee. His entire world was balanced on the edge of a knife, and Calloway was about to let it drop. For years, the Ethelgard Foundation has operated with quiet dignity and profound impact, guided by the vision of its late founder, Alessandro Rossi. Calloway continued. The name Rossi hung in the air. A few people in the crowd who knew the connection turned to look at Isabella, who was now standing near the front of the stage, her posture one of perfect regal calm. Most, however, were still oblivious. Damien felt Chloe's sharp nails dig into his arm. "Rossi," she hissed. That Rossi Damien couldn't speak. His throat was dry, his mind a maelstrom of denial and terror. Alessandro was a force of nature, a man who believed that true wealth is measured not by what you accumulate, but by what you contribute. Calloway went on, his voice filled with genuine reverence. He shaped our world from the shadows, seeking no credit, only progress. Before he passed, he ensured his legacy would continue, placing his life's work into the hands of a successor he had been preparing since birth. A successor who has until now chosen to honor his tradition of privacy. Damien's eyes were locked on Isabella. She wasn't looking at the stage. She was looking directly at him. Her expression was not triumphant, not angry, not sad. It was empty. It was the look of a judge who had already passed sentence. In that moment he saw the full scope of his catastrophic miscalculation. He hadn't just neglected his wife, he had disdained a monarch without realizing she wore a crown. The leadership of the Ethelgard Foundation is a closely guarded secret, Calloway said, leaning closer to the microphone, his voice dropping conspiratorially. The visionary leader known to the world only as AR is in this room tonight. They have decided that this evening, in honor of Alessandro's memory, and to launch the Foundation's most ambitious initiative, yet it is time to step into the light. The air in the ballroom was thick with anticipation. Phones were being subtly raised. The press cordoned off at the back, surged forward against the velvet ropes. Damien felt a cold sweat bead on his forehead. He wanted to run, to disappear, but his feet were bolted to the floor. This was his nightmare, and he was the star of it. He thought of the morning of the 11 missed calls. He thought of his condescending tone, his casual dismissal. Probably a crisis over the color of the new hydrangeas. The memory made him physically sick. She hadn't been calling about flowers. She had been grieving the loss of her grandfather. She had been stepping into the role of one of the most powerful people in the world. And she had reached out to him, her husband, and he had sent her to voicemail. "It is my distinct honor." Calloway's voice swelled, filling every corner of the vast room, to introduce to you for the very first time the mind behind the mission, the heart of the Foundation, and the guardian of Alessandro Rossi's legacy. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the chairwoman of the Ethelgard Foundation. Damien shut his eyes. He couldn't bear to see it. He could only hear the name that would detonate his life. Mrs. Isabella Rossi Blackwood. For a single drawn-out second, the world stopped. A collective intake of breath seemed to suck the very air from the ballroom. Then a wave of stunned silence, so absolute and profound that the clinking of a single ice cube in a distant glass sounded like a gunshot. Damien's eyes snapped open. It was real. The nightmare was real. Every head in the room, hundreds of them, swiveled in unison. First, they looked towards the stage, then as if pulled by an invisible string, they turned towards him. They were looking for his reaction. He was part of the spectacle. His humiliation was the appetizer to Isabella's main course. He saw it all in a dizzying, slow-motion montage. The dropped jaws, the wide, disbelieving eyes of his competitors, the frantic whispering that erupted like wildfire, spreading from table to table. He saw Marcus Thorne, the Fed chairman, nodding slowly, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. He saw Jacob Stern, the private equity king, raise an eyebrow, his calculating gaze flicking from Isabella to Damien, already reassessing deals and power dynamics. And Chloe. He turned to her and saw the blood drain from her face. Her mask of cool ambition was gone, replaced by a raw, ugly look of shock and envy. Her dream of supplanting Isabella, of becoming Mrs. Blackwood, had just been revealed as a pathetic delusion. She hadn't been competing with a simple society wife. She'd been trying to sideline a queen. The realization seemed to age her 10 years in an instant. But it was Isabella who held the room captive. As her name echoed, she took a step forward into the spotlight. The sapphire blue of her dress seemed to absorb the light, making her glow. The Rossi necklace around her neck glittered not as an ornament, but as a sigil of power. She moved with an unhurried, unshakable grace, the picture of serene authority. The quiet, reserved woman Damien had known for 7 years was gone. In her place stood a stranger, a formidable, commanding presence, who owned the very ground she walked on. She ascended the small set of stairs to the stage, her expression calm and composed. She shook David Calloway's hand, murmuring a quiet thank you, before turning to face the audience. She didn't look at the teleprompter. She didn't need it. Her eyes swept across the sea of stunned faces, pausing for a fraction of a second to meet Damien's. In that fleeting glance, he saw the abyss that had opened between them. It was a chasm of his own making, dug with every ignored call, every dismissive comment, every time he had made her feel small, so he could feel big. The silence finally broke, replaced by a smattering of applause, which quickly grew into a thunderous, sustained ovation. It was a recognition of the shock, the drama, the sheer audacity of the reveal. They were applauding the ultimate power play. Damien felt his legs tremble. He had to grip the back of a chair to steady himself. His carefully constructed universe, with him at the center, had just been inverted. He was no longer the sun. He was a forgotten, insignificant moon orbiting a star, whose brilliance he had never even bothered to notice. He watched his wife stand at the podium, a symbol of everything he craved: legacy, respect, true power. And he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he had lost it all. He had been handed the keys to the kingdom on his wedding day, and in his arrogance he had mistaken them for trinkets. The applause died down, and a hush fell over the room once more. Isabella leaned toward the microphone. Her voice when she spoke was not loud, but it was clear and resonant, carrying to every corner of the ballroom. It was the voice of a woman who had found her power and was about to use it. "Thank you." She began, her gaze sweeping over the audience deliberately, avoiding her husband. "My grandfather, Alessandro Rossi, believed in a simple principle. True innovation is born not from ambition, but from empathy." The first sentence was a death blow. His entire company was built on ambition. She had just invalidated his whole philosophy of life without ever mentioning his name. Damien felt the blood rushing in his ears, his vision narrowing until the only thing he could see was the woman on stage, the woman he called his wife, systematically dismantling his world. For decades, Isabella continued her voice, holding the rapt attention of everyone in the room. The Ethelgard Foundation has worked to identify and nurture technologies that serve humanity first and profit second. We have operated from the shadows because my grandfather believed that the work should always be more important than the name attached to it. He taught me that integrity is what you do when no one is watching. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, and Damien felt each one pierce his soul. His entire business model was built on public perception, on splashy announcements, and the cult of his own personality. He lived for the spotlight, for the watching eyes. "Tonight we are stepping out of those shadows for a singular purpose," she announced. In his final directive, my grandfather entrusted the foundation with the stewardship of a revolutionary clean energy patent, a technology with the potential to reshape our world, to heal our planet, and to democratize power for generations to come. This was it, the patent Damien had been willing to kill for. He watched, helpless, as she spoke of it with an easy familiarity, the way he might talk about a minor corporate acquisition. This technology is too important to be entrusted to a partner driven solely by market share or stock price. Isabella declared, her gaze now sweeping across the CEOs and investors in the room. It requires a partner whose values align with our own. A partner who understands that legacy is not about the buildings you erect, but the foundations you lay for others. A partner who listens, who respects and who values partnership, not as a means to an end, but as a sacred trust. The subtext was so loud, it was practically a scream. She was talking about him. She was telling the entire world, everyone he had ever wanted to impress, that he was unworthy. She was not just rejecting his business. She was dissecting his character and finding it wanting on a global stage. She then announced the Foundation's plan. They would not be selling the patent to a single corporation. Instead, they were opening a multi-billion-dollar innovation grant, inviting companies from around the world to collaborate in an open-source development initiative. She was effectively taking the prize off the table and giving it to the world, making Damien's cutthroat pursuit of it seem greedy and small-minded. Her speech ended with a tribute to her grandfather, her voice softening for the first time with genuine emotion. When she finished, the ballroom erupted. The applause was deafening, a genuine roaring tribute to her vision and power. As she stepped down from the stage, she was immediately swarmed. Marcus Thorne was the first to reach her, followed by a dozen of the most powerful people in the city, all clamoring for a moment of her time. Their business cards extended like offerings. Damien was an island in the middle of the chaos. People who had been fawning over him an hour ago now gave him a wide berth, their eyes filled with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. He had become a pariah in his own kingdom. Chloe had already vanished. She knew a sinking ship when she saw one. He had to get to her. He pushed through the crowd, his apologies and excuses ignored. He finally broke through the circle of admirers and stood before his wife. "Isabella," he said, his voice hoarse. She turned to him, her face an unreadable mask. The powerful people around her fell silent, sensing the impending drama. "We need to talk," he pleaded, his voice low and urgent. "In private." "We have nothing to talk about, Damien," she replied, her voice as cold as glacial ice. "You made your position perfectly clear this morning. 11 times. The public shaming was brutal. A few people nearby winced. I didn't know," he hissed, desperate. "If you had told me, if I had any idea who you were. That's the point." She cut him off, her voice dangerously quiet. "You shouldn't have had to know who I was to listen. You only needed to know that I was your wife. The woman who was trying to tell you that her grandfather, the man who walked her down the aisle to you, had just died. But that wasn't important enough for you. The deal was, your ambition was." The truth of her words hit him with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't about the money or the power he had missed out on. It was about this fundamental human failure. "I'm sorry," he whispered the words, feeling pathetic and hollow. "Izzy, please. Let's go home. We can fix this." She gave a small, humorless laugh. "Fix this, Damien. You don't fix a shattered vase. You just sweep up the pieces. And you," she said, her eyes boring into his, "are no longer welcome in my home." She turned her back on him, then giving her full attention to Marcus Thorne, dismissing him as completely and utterly as he had dismissed her calls. The circle of power closed around her, pushing Damien out, leaving him utterly and completely alone in the center of the crowded room. His empire and his marriage turning to dust around him. The fallout was not a wave, but a tsunami. It began the moment Damien stumbled out of the Carlisle, the echoes of applause for his wife, a roaring torment in his ears. The usual phalanx of paparazzi and society reporters paid him no mind, their lenses and questions, all aimed at the hotel's grand entrance, waiting for another glimpse of the woman who had just redrawn the city's entire power map. Damien Blackwood, the man who lived for the camera's flash, had become invisible. His driver, a man who typically leaped out to open the door, simply watched him approach, his expression a careful blank. The ride back to the penthouse was a journey through a silent personal hell, the city lights blurring into streaks of condemnation against the tinted windows. When he arrived, the cavernous apartment felt different. The silence that had once been a symbol of his sterile control was now accusatory, amplifying his solitude. He walked through the marble halls, his footsteps echoing like a judge's gavel. He went to Isabella's dressing room, a space he had always considered a frivolous indulgence. He saw the black Dior gown he had sent for her, still hanging in its garment bag. It looked like a funeral shroud. On the vanity table, a single object was placed in the center, her wedding ring. Next to it was the simple gold band he had given her. The diamonds of her engagement ring glittered under the recessed lighting, looking cold and sharp. The message was absolute. Their marriage wasn't just broken. It had been formally dissolved in her heart long before any court would make it official. He slept for 2 hours in a guest room, a fitful, nightmare-plagued sleep, and awoke to the full fury of the world he had once commanded. His phone, which he had silenced for Isabella, was now a screaming, vibrating beacon of his own implosion. Hundreds of messages, alerts, and missed calls. The headlines were brutal. The Wall Street Journal ran a measured but devastating analysis titled "Blackwood's Blind Spot," a crisis of character and governance. The tabloids were less kind. Blackwood blackballed by secret queen wife screamed one. His face was plastered everywhere, a portrait of arrogance moments before the fall, often next to a radiant, powerful image of Isabella on stage. Blackwood Corp's stock opened in a nosedive. The ticker was a river of red, washing away billions in market value before the first morning coffee was finished. The Japanese investors formally retracted their offer in a terse public statement before 9:00 a.m. His board summoned him, not to a meeting, but to a tribunal. He walked into the boardroom of the company he had bled. For the company he had built, from a single idea into a global force, and was met not with sympathy or even anger, but with the cold, dead-eyed pragmatism of men protecting their money. His allies of yesterday were his executioners today. The chairman of the board, a man Damien had personally installed, didn't even offer him a seat. The reputational damage is catastrophic. Damien, the chairman, stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Your personal life has compromised the fiduciary duty we have to our shareholders. Your judgment has been called into question in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. This is a private matter. Damien roared, his voice cracking. It has nothing to do with the company's performance. It has everything to do with it. A woman from the board, Eleanor Vance, countered coolly. You spent millions and months of corporate resources chasing a patent held by your own wife. You failed to perform the most basic due diligence. You were either grossly negligent or you were lying to this board. Which is it? Damien had no answer. He stood there exposed and powerless as they invoked clause after clause from his contract, systematically stripping him of his power. First, his role as chairman was suspended. Then an interim CEO was appointed effective immediately. By the end of the hour, he was escorted to his office by security to collect his personal belongings, as he boxed up a few photos and a single heavy award. He could see the new CEO, a man who had once been his subordinate, already directing people to change the nameplate on his door. He was erased. The empire he had constructed had devoured him. Meanwhile, Isabella was not celebrating. She had spent the night after the gala in a quiet suite at the plaza, a location her security team had prepared weeks in advance. She had known this confrontation was a possibility, a final terrible option if Damien proved himself to be the man she feared he had become. Her first call was not to her lawyers, but to the New York Children's Hospital, authorizing an immediate wire transfer of the gala's proceeds, plus a supplemental anonymous donation from her personal accounts that doubled the total. Her second call was to the head of her family's estate in Geneva to begin making arrangements for her grandfather's memorial. Her grief for Alessandro was a deep, steady ache, but it was now interwoven with a new grief for her marriage. She had loved Damien, or at least the man she believed him to be, the ambitious, driven young man who had seemed so full of promise. But she now understood that his ambition wasn't a fire that built things. It was a black hole that consumed them. It had consumed their love, his integrity, and finally his own creation. In the months that followed, their worlds diverged so completely, it was as if they had lived on different planets all along. Damien became a ghost. He holed up in a 5-star hotel, living off his severance package, a gilded prison, where he could watch the world move on without him. He'd spend his days in a bitter alcohol-fueled haze, flipping through channels only to be confronted by Isabella's image. There she was, meeting with the UN Secretary General. There she was on the cover of Time magazine, lauded as a New Age philanthropist, reinventing the rules. There she was announcing the first recipients of the Ethelgard Clean Energy Grant, a consortium of innovative startups, including one led by a brilliant young scientist Damien had arrogantly dismissed a year prior. His attempts to reconnect with his old life were met with polite, impenetrable walls. The friends who had once clamored for his invitations now had their secretaries inform him they were in a meeting. He was a social leper, a cautionary tale whispered at the very galas he once dominated. In the lonely, quiet hours of the night, the memory of the 11 missed calls would return to haunt him. He would see her name flashing on his screen, feel the phantom vibration in his hand, and remember the casual, contemptuous swipe of his thumb. It was the single most destructive act of his life, an act of such profound arrogance that it had cost him everything. He hadn't just lost a company or a fortune. He had lost the chance to stand beside a truly great woman, not as her master, but as her equal. The depth of that loss was an ocean, and he was drowning in it. Isabella, conversely, had never been more alive. She shed the Blackwood from her name as easily as a snake sheds its skin, becoming simply Isabella Rossi. She stepped into the role her grandfather had prepared her for, with a natural, commanding grace. She wasn't just a figurehead. She was a visionary. She traveled the world, her focus shifting from society galas to field sites for clean water projects and mobile health clinics. She spoke not in the empty corporate jargon Damien favored, but with a quiet intelligence and genuine empathy that moved people. She discovered a strength she never knew she possessed, a resilience forged in the lonely silence of her marriage. She learned that power wasn't about dominating a room, it was about inspiring it. Legacy wasn't your name on a building, it was the lives you changed for the better. The final divorce decree arrived for Damien on a cold Tuesday afternoon, delivered by a stoic courier. It was just a stack of papers, the legal codification of a reality he had been living for months. He signed them without reading his hand steady. The rage had burned out, leaving only a hollowed-out landscape of regret. It was over. On that same day, Isabella was in her grandfather's old office overlooking Central Park, Her lawyer called with the news. She thanked him, her voice even. After hanging up, she didn't move for a long time. She looked out at the autumn leaves, a riot of gold and red against the grey sky. She felt a pang, a ghost of a memory of her and Damien walking through that same park years ago, when their future had seemed as bright and full of colour as the trees before her. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, not for the man he became, but for the man she had hoped he would be. Then the intercom on her desk buzzed. "Madam Chairwoman," her assistant's voice came through crisp and respectful. "The architects for the new research hospital are here to see you." Isabella wiped the tear away. The past was the past. Her grief had been honored, her accounts settled. The future was waiting. She had lost a husband who saw her as an accessory, but she had found her purpose. She had inherited an empire of wealth, but she had built an empire of self. "Send them in," she said, her voice filled with a calm, unshakable strength. "We have work to do." Isabella's journey from a silenced wife to a global force serves as a powerful reminder that the quietest people often have the most to say. Her story isn't just about revenge. It's about reclamation. It's about reclaiming her name, her power, and her voice from a world and a man that tried to render her invisible. She proved that true strength isn't about the noise you make or the attention you demand, but about the integrity you hold when no one is watching. Damien's empire was built on sand, on the fragile ego of one man. Hers is built on a foundation of purpose, a legacy that will outlive them all. Her story is a testament to the fact that underestimating someone can be the most expensive mistake you ever make. If Isabella's incredible story of transformation and justice inspired you, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of their own hidden strength. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story of karma empowerment and the shocking secrets hidden just beneath the surface. Thank you for listening. A signature. That's all it took to shatter a perfect life. For 9 months, she lovingly called him Arlo. She felt his every kick, his every hiccup under her heart. Her husband James held her hand, whispering promises of their future with their son Arlo. But in the cold, sterile light of the hospital room, as she held the official birth certificate for the first time, another name stared back at her. A name she didn't choose. A name she didn't know. It was in that silent, soul-crushing moment she realized the man she loved had made the most important decision of their lives without her. This isn't just a story about a name. It's about a lie so profound it could only be answered by the deadbolt click of a changed lock. The late afternoon sun of a crisp Boston autumn spilled across the Persian rug in the nursery, illuminating dust motes, dancing in the air like tiny golden fairies. Olivia traced the hand-painted giraffes on the mural, their long necks stretching towards a soft, cloud-like ceiling. Everything was perfect. Almost. For the past 6 months, this room in their sprawling Chestnut Hill home had been her sanctuary, a place of quiet anticipation, insulated from the subtle but immense pressures that came with marrying into the Sterling family. James was different. He was her anchor in the often choppy waters of his family's old money society. He was the one who saw her Olivia Chen, the art gallery curator with a sharp eye and a sharper wit, not just a suitable match for the Sterling heir. Their love story felt like a modern fairy tale. He'd walked into her gallery to appraise a piece for his mother, and had been captivated not by the art, but by the passionate way she spoke about it. He was handsome, kind, and to his family's quiet chagrin, utterly besotted with her. Now at 38 weeks pregnant, Olivia felt a nesting instinct so powerful it was a physical force. Every tiny detail of this room was a testament to her love for their unborn son. The crib, a sleek modern design she'd picked out, stood in stark contrast to the heavy ornate furniture that filled the rest of the 6-bedroom mansion. "It has no character," Liv, her mother-in-law, Eleanor Sterling, had commented during her last visit, running a dismissive manicured finger over the crib's smooth oak finish. "A baby needs heritage." "Wait." Olivia had just smiled, patting her enormous belly. "He'll have plenty of that, Eleanor. We want him to have a little bit of lightness, too." The name was part of that lightness. Arlo Cole Sterling. Arlo for her late grandfather, a kind, gentle man who taught her how to paint. Cole because she simply loved the sound of it, strong and clear. James had agreed instantly. Arlo Cole Sterling, he'd whispered into her hair just last night. His hands splayed protectively over her stomach, feeling the baby's rhythmic movements. "I can't wait to meet him, Liv. Our son." The memory was so sweet, so vivid, it made her ache. She lowered herself carefully onto the plush rocking chair, the one James had spent an entire Saturday assembling, and let out a contented sigh. Their life was a dream. The brownstone on Beacon Street had been traded for this palatial house when they found out she was pregnant. James's software company was thriving, and her gallery was gaining prestige. They had everything. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, a sliver of unease would prick at her. It was in the way James's tone would shift when his mother called, a subtle deference creeping in. It was in the casual mentions of the family trust and the board meetings he now had to attend. He'd always shielded her from the most suffocating aspects of his lineage. But since the pregnancy, the Sterling name seemed to be closing in a gilded cage, masquerading as a life of privilege. The firstborn son carries the legacy Olivia Eleanor had told her over a tense lunch at the Harvard Club. It is a responsibility James is finally beginning to understand. Olivia had brushed it off. James loved her. James loved their plans for their son. The name was settled. The future was theirs to write. A sharp, low cramp seized her, stealing her breath. She gripped the arms of the rocking chair, her knuckles turning white. Another one followed, stronger this time. Her heart began to pound, a frantic drum, against her ribs. She looked at the hospital bag, packed and waiting by the door. It was time. She called James, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. "It's happening," she breathed. "I'm on my way, Liv. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I love you." As she waited, she walked one last time around the nursery, her hand trailing over the crib, the changing table, the bookshelf filled with stories she couldn't wait to read. "We're going to meet you soon, Arlo," she whispered to her belly. "We're so ready for you." The contraction that hit her as she heard James's car screech into the driveway was so intense it brought her to her knees. This was it. The end of the waiting. The beginning of everything. She had no idea how right she was. The first 24 hours were a blur of primal effort and transcendent joy. The labor was long and arduous, but James was by her side, a steady presence, his hand in hers, his voice a constant stream of encouragement. And then at 4:17 a.m., their son arrived with a lusty cry and a full head of dark hair, just like his father's. When When the nurse laid him on her chest, warm and squirming, the world dissolved. Nothing else existed. Not the sterile smell of the hospital room. Not the exhaustion clawing at her bones. Not the subtle tension that had been humming beneath the surface of their lives. There was only the weight of her son, the soft press of his cheek against her skin. "He's perfect, Liv," James whispered, his voice thick with emotion as he kissed her forehead, then the baby's head. "Just perfect, Arlo." She sighed, tears of happiness streaming down her face. "Hi, Arlo." They spent the next day in a blissful bubble. Visitors were kept to a minimum at Olivia's request. Even Eleanor was held at bay, a fact for which Olivia was profoundly grateful. It was just the three of them, a new family learning the rhythms of each other. James was a natural changing diapers, with a surprising lack of squeamishness, and rocking the baby to sleep with a low, rumbling hum. Olivia watched him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. The doubts, the whispers of unease, all felt like a distant dream. This was real. This was their life. On the second day, a perky administrative nurse bustled in, clipboard in hand. "Good morning. I just have the official paperwork for you to review and sign off on. The birth certificate information and Social Security application." "Of course," Olivia said, carefully, shifting the sleeping baby in her arms. James, who had been dozing in the uncomfortable armchair, stood up. "I can take care of that, honey. You just rest with him." He took the clipboard and leaned against the window, his back to her as he scribbled his signature. It seemed like a small, helpful gesture. A husband taking on the bureaucratic chores while his wife recovered. Olivia smiled, pulling the baby's blanket up to his chin. "All set," James said, handing the clipboard back to the nurse with a charming giggle. "Thank you so much." The nurse beamed at him before turning to Olivia. "And here is your souvenir copy of the birth certificate application. The official one will be mailed in a few weeks. Congratulations again, you two. He's a beautiful baby." She placed a crisp, heavy piece of paper on the bedside table and left. Olivia, feeling a flutter of sentimentality, reached for it. She wanted to see his name in print. Arlo Cole Sterling, the official declaration of his existence. Her fingers brushed the paper, and she lifted it. Her eyes scanned past the hospital name, the date, the weight and length, down to the box labeled Name. And there it was, printed in stark black official letters. Arthur James Sterling IV. The name didn't register at first. It was a jumble of letters that made no sense, like a foreign language. She blinked, her sleep-addled brain trying to process the information. Arthur. Where did that come from? Arthur was James's late grandfather, a famously ruthless patriarch who had built the Sterling Empire through hostile takeovers and an iron will. He was a man Eleanor lionized, and James had always spoken of with a complicated mixture of fear and resentment. Her eyes darted back to the paper, willing the letters to rearrange themselves into the name she knew, the name she'd whispered into her belly for months. Arlo Cole Sterling. But they remained stubbornly, cruelly the same. Arthur James Sterling IV. A cold dread, sharp and swift, pierced through her postpartum euphoria. It started in her stomach and spread through her veins, turning her blood to ice. The baby in her arms suddenly felt impossibly heavy. James. Her voice was a small, tight thing, unrecognizable. He was looking at his phone, a faint smile on his face as he typed. He didn't look up. "Yeah, babe, James, what is this?" she asked, her voice gaining a dangerous edge. She held the paper out. her hand trembling so violently the words blurred. He finally looked up, and for a fleeting second, she saw a flash of pure panic in his eyes. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a practiced, placating calm that she suddenly terrifyingly recognized as the sterling face. "Oh, that," he said, walking over. He wouldn't meet her eyes, focusing instead on a spot on the wall behind her. "Liv, we need to talk about that. Talk about it." She repeated the words, feeling like shards of glass in her mouth. The baby stirred, sensing her distress, and let out a soft whimper. "What is there to talk about? This is a mistake. A typo. His name is Arlo." "It's not a mistake," James said quietly, finally forcing himself to look at her. His expression was a carefully constructed mask of gentle reason, but his eyes were pleading. "I named him Arthur." The world tilted. The sterile white walls of the hospital room seemed to be closing in on her. The rhythmic beep of the monitor beside her bed was a countdown to a detonation she hadn't seen coming. "You named him Arthur," she whispered, the betrayal so immense, so absolute, it was a physical blow. "You did this. Without me, while I was in labor, you went behind my back and changed our son's name. It was for the best. Olivia. For the family. For his future. His future. What about our future? The one we planned together. The one that included our son Arlo." His phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up. A text from Mother. "Is it done? I'm transferring the funds to the new trust now. You've made your grandfather proud." Olivia saw it. Her vision narrowed on the glowing screen. The text message was a confession, a motive, a co-conspirator. This wasn't just James. This was Eleanor. This was a transaction. Her baby, her son, had been a commodity in a deal she knew nothing about. It was my mother, James, started seeing where she was looking. There's a trust, a significant one. It was contingent on the firstborn son being named Arthur. It secures his entire future, Liv. College, a house, anything he ever wants. He had a secure future, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. She was shaking with a rage so profound it scared her. "He had us. That was supposed to be enough. You sold his name. You sold our son's name without telling me. Olivia, please be reasonable." Reasonable. The word was a laugh, sharp and broken. "You lie to me for months. You let me paint Arlo's room. You let me call him by that name. You hold my hand while I'm screaming in pain, all the while knowing you're going to erase a part of me, a part of us on a legal document the second you get the chance. And you want me to be reasonable?" She looked down at the baby in her arms. This beautiful, perfect stranger, now saddled with the legacy of a man, he'd never know a name that felt like a brand seared onto his skin. And in that moment, the love for her husband curdled into something cold and hard and unrecognizable. She looked at James, at his handsome, pleading face, and saw not the man she loved, but a stranger wearing his skin, a pawn in his mother's dynastic games. "Get out," she whispered. "Liv, please. Get out." Her voice cracked, but it held a core of steel he had never heard before. "Get out of this room. Now." He hesitated, then saw the look on her face and knew there was no arguing. He backed away slowly, his hands held up in a gesture of surrender, and slipped out the door, closing it softly behind him. Olivia was left alone in the silent room, with the beep of the monitor, the weight of her son, and the crushing weight of the lie. She looked from the baby's innocent face to the birth certificate. Arthur James Sterling IV. It was a declaration of war, and she had no intention of losing. The ride home from the hospital was a study in suffocating silence. The brand-new top-of-the-line car seat sat in the back of their Range Rover, a throne for a tiny prince whose very identity was a battleground. Olivia sat in the back with the baby, her body angled away from James, creating a physical barrier that mirrored the chasm that had opened between them. James tried sporadically to breach the silence. "The house is all ready for him," he said, his eyes finding hers in the rearview mirror. Mrs. Gable stocked the fridge. Olivia stared out the window, watching the familiar scenery of Chestnut Hill slide by. The stately brick homes, the manicured lawns, the ancient, sprawling oaks. It all looked different now, alien. The beautiful facade of their life had been ripped away, and all she could see was the ugly, rotting framework beneath. "Liv, I know you're angry." He tried again. His voice strained. "But when you think about what this means for him, for his future—" "Stop talking about his future," she said, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. "You forfeited the right to do that when you made a unilateral decision about his present." He flinched, as if struck. The rest of the drive passed in silence. When they pulled into the long, sweeping driveway of their home, Olivia's heart, which she thought couldn't sink any lower, dropped. There, parked near the grand entrance, was Eleanor's black Mercedes, her driver standing stoically by the door. "What is she doing here?" Olivia demanded, her exhaustion warring with a fresh surge of adrenaline. She wanted to be here to welcome her grandson home. "James," said his voice, taking on that familiar, deferential tone. "The first Arthur in 2 generations. It's a big day for her." Her grandson, Olivia, repeated the words, tasting like poison. She looked down at the sleeping baby. She bought and paid for this moment, didn't she? Well, I hope she enjoys it. Without waiting for James to open her door, she got out, unbuckled the car seat with practiced numb efficiency, and carried her son towards the house, her sanctuary, that now felt like enemy territory. Eleanor was waiting just inside the marble foyer, dressed in a Chanel tweed suit, her face a perfect mask of benevolent matriarchy. "Olivia, darling," she cooed, gliding forward, her arms outstretched. "Let me see him. Let me see my little Arthur." Olivia instinctively tightened her grip on the car seat, taking a step back. "He's sleeping. Eleanor." "Oh, a little peek won't hurt," she insisted, her smile not quite reaching her cold, assessing eyes. She peered into the carrier. "Oh, James, he has the sterling chin. Arthur will be so proud." She spoke of her late husband as if he were in the next room. The sight of this woman, the architect of her betrayal, gloating in her foyer, was more than Olivia could bear. She felt a wave of dizziness, the postpartum hormones, sleep deprivation, and white-hot rage churning into a toxic cocktail. "I need to take him upstairs," Olivia said, pushing past her and James. "He needs to be fed." She fled up the grand, curving staircase, her footsteps muffled by the thick runner. She could hear their voices below, James's low and placating, Eleanor's crisp and commanding. She didn't want to hear them. She locked the door to the master bedroom suite, a click that echoed the shutting down of her own heart, and finally allowed herself to break. She laid the baby in his bassinet beside the bed and sank to the floor, silent sobs racking her body. She cried for the loss of her son Arlo. She cried for the loss of her husband, the man she thought she knew, and she cried for her own naivety, for believing their love could conquer the gravitational pull of the sterling name and its fortune. Hours passed. She fed the baby, she changed him. She held him close, whispering the name she'd chosen for him, over and over again, a desperate incantation. Arlo. Your name is Arlo. Late in the evening, a soft knock came at the door. Liv. It's me. My mother's gone. Olivia didn't move. Liv, please open the door. We can't go on like this. Let me in. Let's talk. There's nothing to talk about. James, she called out, her voice raw. Of course there is. This is our home. You can't just lock me out. It stopped feeling like my home the moment I saw that birth certificate, she replied. She heard him sigh in frustration. Fine. Be like this. I'm going out for a bit to let you cool down. I'll be back later. We will talk about this, Olivia. She listened to his footsteps retreating down the hall, the heavy front door opening and closing. To let you cool down. The condescension in his tone was the final straw. He still didn't get it. He thought this was a tantrum, a hormonal fit. He didn't understand that he had fundamentally broken the trust that was the bedrock of their marriage. He thought he could wait her out. She stood up, her movements stiff but resolute. A cold, clear purpose settled over her. He wanted to wait for her to cool down. He was going to be waiting a very long time. She picked up her phone, the same phone that had received his loving texts just days ago. She opened a web browser and typed 24/7 Locksmith Chestnut Hill. The first result had a glowing green button, Emergency Service. She pressed it. A man with a kind, weary voice answered on the second ring. Harrison Lock and Key. Bill speaking. Hello. Olivia said, her voice steady and clear. I need someone to come and change the locks on my house. All of them, as soon as possible. Is this an emergency, Mom? A domestic situation? Olivia looked at the sleeping baby, at the opulent room that felt like a prison. She thought of James's casual betrayal and Eleanor's triumphant smile. Yes, she said, a strange sense of calm washing over her. Yes, it is. I can have a technician there in 45 minutes. Thank you, Olivia said. I'll be waiting. She hung up the phone. She went to the nursery, their nursery, and looked at the name Arlo, spelled out in soft blue wooden blocks on a shelf. With deliberate, precise movements, she took them down. She then walked through the house, a ghost in her own life, gathering every trace of the future that had been stolen. The little onesie that said, Future Artist. A nod to her profession. The silver cup engraved with the letter D from her own parents. She packed it all into a box. When the locksmith arrived, a quiet professional man named Kevin, she let him in. He took in the scene, the new mother with haunted eyes, the palatial, silent house, the request to change every single lock, and simply nodded. He didn't ask questions. He just got to work. For the next 2 hours, the house was filled with the sounds of drilling and hammering, the sounds of fortifications being built. With each turn of the screwdriver, each click of a new tumbler falling into place, Olivia felt a layer of her grief and helplessness fall away, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. By 11 p.m., it was done. Kevin handed her a set of new, gleaming brass keys. That's the front backside door and the garage interior door, ma'am. You have the only copies. Thank you, Kevin, she said, transferring a significant sum to him via her phone. Thank you for your discretion. Of course. Good night, ma'am. She locked the door behind him, engaging the new, unfamiliar deadbolt. The sound was deep, final, and satisfying. She was alone with her son in a fortress of her own making. She was watching the baby monitor from her bed when she saw the headlights of James's Range Rover sweep across the driveway just after midnight. She watched him walk to the front door, a silhouette against the motion-activated floodlights. She saw him put his key in the lock and fail. He tried again, jiggled it. She could imagine the confused frustration on his face. He walked to the side door. The same result. His phone buzzed on the nightstand beside her bed. It was him. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Then a text message appeared on the screen. Liv. What the hell is going on? My key isn't working. Olivia picked up her phone. Her fingers were steady as she typed her reply. Your key doesn't work because it's not your house anymore, James. You made your choice. You chose your mother and a trust fund over your wife and son. You made a decision about our family without me. So now I'm making one without you. You are not welcome here. Find somewhere else to sleep. She sent the message. Then she turned her phone to silent, rolled over, and faced her son, sleeping peacefully in his bassinet. The war had just begun, but for the first time since seeing that name on the birth certificate, she felt like she had an army, and its first victory was the silence on the other side of the locked door. The silence lasted for precisely 7 minutes. Then the assault began. James's first tactic was pleading. A string of text messages flooded her phone, each more desperate than the last. Liv, this is insane. It's freezing out here. Let me in. We need to talk this out face to face. You, me. No one else. Please, Olivia, think about the baby. He needs his father. He needs his father. The hypocrisy of that statement was so staggering, it almost made her laugh. She pictured James standing on their perfectly manicured lawn, lit by the tasteful landscape lighting he'd been so proud of, unable to enter his own $1 million home. The image gave her a grim satisfaction. When the texts went unanswered, the knocking started. Not the polite rap of a visitor, but a hard, insistent pounding that vibrated through the solid oak door. Olivia. Open this door now. The baby stirred in his bassinet, his little face scrunching up. Olivia's resolve hardened. She would not allow him to terrorize them. She picked up the baby, holding him close her body, a shield against the noise. The pounding stopped. A moment of quiet. Then the doorbell began to ring, a frantic, incessant chime. He was leaning on it. A petulant child denied his way. Olivia walked to the upstairs window that overlooked the front entrance, staying hidden behind the heavy damask curtain. She saw him there, his handsome face contorted with fury, his fist still raised from banging on the door. He looked utterly lost. Good. After 5 solid minutes, the chiming stopped. He was pacing now, a caged animal, his phone pressed to his ear. She knew with chilling certainty who he was calling. 20 minutes later, a second pair of headlights sliced through the darkness. The sleek black nose of Eleanor's Mercedes sedan purred to a stop behind James's Range Rover. Eleanor Sterling emerged from the passenger side, not in a tweed suit this time, but in a silk dressing gown and a cashmere wrap, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, even at 1 in the morning. She looked not like a concerned grandmother, but like a queen arriving to quell a peasant uprising. She marched up to her son, her movements sharp and angry. Olivia couldn't hear their words, but she could see the pantomime of the conversation. James gesticulating wildly at the house. Eleanor patting his arm. then turning a gaze of pure venom towards the master bedroom window, as if she could sense Olivia watching. Eleanor took out her own phone. A moment later, Olivia's phone lit up with a call from a number she knew by heart. She let it go to voicemail. A text immediately followed. "Eleanor, Olivia. This childish theatrical display is beneath you. It is certainly beneath a Sterling. You will open this door at once and stop this nonsense." Olivia felt a surge of defiance. She typed a reply not to Eleanor but to James. "Get your mother off my property. This is between you and me. Her presence here proves my point. You are not a husband or a father. You are a puppet. This conversation is over until she is gone." She watched from the window as James read the text. He showed it to his mother. Eleanor's mouth thinned into a hard white line. She gestured angrily, clearly refusing to leave. James looked from his mother's furious face to the dark, silent house. He looked trapped. He looked weak. Olivia had a sudden, brilliant idea. She went to the smart home control panel on the wall, the one James had installed, that controlled everything from the lights to the sound system to the sprinklers. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through the options. There it was. Irrigation system Zone 1. Front lawn. She pressed the manual start button. On the lawn below, every single sprinkler head erupted with a vengeance, sending powerful jets of cold water arcing across the pristine grass. A direct hit soaked James and Eleanor, who let out an indignant shriek. "What is the meaning of this?" Eleanor screeched, shielding her silk robe as if it were under attack from acid rain. James scrambled away from the spray, looking up at the house in disbelief. Olivia allowed herself a small, bitter smile. If they wanted a theatrical display, she would give them one. The drenched and furious duo retreated to Eleanor's car. For a few minutes they just sat there, the car's interior light illuminating their heated discussion. Finally, the Mercedes backed slowly out of the driveway and disappeared down the street. James's Range Rover remained. He was staying, laying siege. He sent one final text. "Fine, you win for tonight. But this isn't over, Liv, not by a long shot." Olivia watched him get back into his car, recline the driver's seat, and plunge the interior into darkness. She stood at the window for a long time, watching the car that held the man who was now a stranger to her. The siege of Sterling Manor had begun, but the woman inside was no damsel in distress. She was the commander of the fort, and she had just won the first battle. Sleep would not come easily, but as she lay down, the keys to her new kingdom safe on the nightstand, she knew she had done the right thing. The locks were not just on the doors, they were around her heart, and James no longer had the key. The next morning, the Range Rover was gone. A small part of Olivia felt a pang of something not regret, but a hollow echo of the life that had vanished overnight. She quickly quashed it. This was not a time for sentimentality. This was a time for strategy. After a mostly sleepless night, spent feeding the baby and watching the driveway, Olivia knew she couldn't do this alone. The Sterlings had wealth influence and a team of lawyers who could crush people for sport. She had her wits, a newborn son, and a righteous fury that was quickly solidifying into cold, hard resolve. She needed her own army. Her first call was to her parents in California. She told them everything, her voice cracking as she recounted the story of the birth certificate. Their reaction was immediate and unequivocal. "You're flying out here today, honey," her father, a retired architect, said, his voice tight with anger. "Both of you. We'll get you the best family lawyer in the state." "No, Dad," Olivia said, surprising herself with her own firmness. "I'm not running. This is my home. He abandoned this home, not me. I'm staying here. But I do need a lawyer. The best one in Boston." Her second call was to that lawyer, a woman named Kate Mercer, a notorious shark in the world of high-net-worth divorces, recommended by a friend from the art world who had gone through a similarly messy split. He did what Kate asked after Olivia explained the situation, a note of impressed disbelief in her voice. Changed the name on the birth certificate for a trust fund, Honey. In 20 years of doing this, that's a new one. It's a violation of trust so profound it's almost poetic. We can work with this. The validation in Kate's voice was like a balm. "What do I do?" Olivia asked. "You sit tight and you don't speak to him or his mother. You document everything. Every text, every call, every time he drives by the house. And you start looking. Men like James' families, like the Sterlings. The name on the birth certificate isn't the only secret they're keeping. Look for financial statements, trust documents, anything he might have left behind." Following Kate's advice, Olivia turned her home into an intelligence-gathering headquarters. During the baby's nap times, she began a methodical search of James's home office, a space she'd rarely entered. It was a masculine sanctuary of dark wood leather and the smell of expensive cologne. It was also a treasure trove. Tucked away in a locked drawer of his desk, a lock she pried open with a screwdriver, from the kitchen she found it. A folder labeled Sterling Family Trust, AJS 4. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was all there in black and white. A sub-trust of the main Sterling family fortune, established by Arthur Sterling Sr. decades ago. It stipulated that the firstborn male heir of his grandson James would inherit a staggering sum upwards of $20 million, provided the child was legally named Arthur James Sterling IV. The money would be managed by a trustee until the boy's 25th birthday. The trustee Olivia saw with a jolt of ice in her veins was Eleanor Sterling. The betrayal was deeper than she could have imagined. This wasn't just about securing their son's future. It was about control. Eleanor would hold the purse strings not just for her grandson, but indirectly for James and Olivia as well. They would be beholden to her for any major expense, any significant life choice. The name wasn't just a name, it was a leash. As she dug deeper, she found more. Statements for credit cards in James's name she'd never seen before, with charges for lavish dinners in the financial district, hotel suites, and what looked like rent payments on a luxury apartment in the Seaport district, an apartment she knew nothing about. Who was he meeting? What was he hiding? The perfect husband, the doting father-to-be was a construct, a facade. And she had been living in the stage set he'd built. Just as she was reeling from these discoveries, her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it, but something told her to answer. "Is this Olivia?" A young woman's voice asked, hesitant and quiet. "Who is this?" It's Chloe, James's sister." Olivia's guard went up immediately. Chloe was the youngest Sterling, a free-spirited artist who had always been kind to her, but was still undeniably a Sterling. "What do you want, Chloe? I heard what happened." Chloe's voice was barely a whisper. "My mother she's on a rampage." "I'm so sorry, Olivia." What James did was unforgivable. Tears pricked Olivia's eyes. It was the first time someone from his side had acknowledged the depth of the betrayal. "He told me you locked him out," Chloe continued. "Good for you. Honestly, why are you calling me Chloe?" Olivia asked, still wary. Because I hate what my family does to people, what my mother does. She did it to my father. She did it to James. And now she's trying to do it to you and your son. There's something you need to know. The Arthur Trust. It's not just about the money. Olivia sat down, clutching the phone. What do you mean? My grandfather. Arthur was a monster, Chloe said, her voice shaking slightly. A controlling, abusive man. The trust comes with conditions, bylaws. The trustee, my mother, has the power to make decisions about the beneficiary's education, upbringing, even their approved place of residence, if she deems the parents unfit or not acting in the best interests of the Sterling legacy. The room spun. Unfit. It was a weapon. Eleanor could use any misstep, any deviation from her plan, to declare Olivia unfit and gain legal influence over her son's life. Changing the locks, filing for divorce, it could all be twisted and used against her. She's already talking to the family lawyers, Olivia Chloe warned. She's trying to paint you as unstable, hysterical, a new mother suffering from postpartum psychosis. She's going to try and take your baby. The threat landed with the force of a physical blow. This was no longer just a marital dispute. It was a war for her child. Why are you telling me this? Olivia whispered. Because James was too weak to stand up to her. But maybe you're not. And because that little boy deserves to be Arlo, not a pawn named Arthur. Check the prenuptial agreement, Olivia. The one she had her lawyers draft. Check the fine print under the family legacy clause. James probably doesn't even know it's in there. The call ended. Olivia's mind raced. The prenup. She'd barely read it at the time, swept up in love and trusting James when he said it was just a formality to protect the family business. She found her copy in their safe. With trembling fingers, she flipped to the clause Chloe had mentioned, and there it was buried in dense legalese, a stipulation that in matters pertaining to the cultural and financial heritage of any children, the decisions of the Sterling Family Trust's appointed trustee would be given significant legal weight. She had signed it. Years ago, she had signed a document that handed Eleanor Sterling the keys to her future child's life. But Chloe's call had given her more than just a warning. It had given her an ally, an inside source, and it had revealed her enemy's playbook. Eleanor expected her to be hysterical, emotional, unstable. Fine. She would be the exact opposite. She would be cold, calculating, and armed with information. She photocopied every document, every statement. She took pictures. She uploaded everything to a secure cloud server and shared it with her lawyer, Kate. The siege might be happening at her front door, but the real war would be fought with paper and secrets. And she was finally ready to fight back. 3 days after changing the locks, Olivia made her move. The house had become her fortress and her war room. Chloe's intel combined with the documents she'd uncovered formed a powerful arsenal. She was no longer just a wounded wife. She was a woman with a strategy. Through her lawyer, Kate Mercer, she arranged a meeting. Not at the house and not at a Sterling-owned office building. She chose a neutral, sterile location, a conference room at a high-end mediation center in downtown Boston. It was a place devoid of history or power dynamics, a blank slate where the truth could be laid bare. She stipulated the terms of the meeting. James was to come alone. No lawyers present in the room, though Kate would be waiting in an adjacent office. No Eleanor. This was a conversation between a husband and a wife, or what was left of them. Olivia arrived first. She chose a seat at the long, polished table that did not face the door, forcing him to walk in, and see her already in a position of power. She wore not a mourning wife's attire, but a sharp black pantsuit she'd favoured for tough negotiations at the gallery. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. When James walked in, she wanted him to see not the new mother he'd betrayed, but the woman he had underestimated. He entered looking haggard. He hadn't been sleeping. His expensive suit was rumpled, and his eyes were red-rimmed. He looked at her, and his face was a mix of desperation and hope. "Liv," he breathed, starting towards her. "Thank you for doing this." She held up a hand, a gesture that stopped him cold. "Sit down, James." He flinched at her tone, the warmth completely gone, replaced by a chilling calm. He sat opposite her, the expanse of polished mahogany between them, feeling like a mile-wide canyon. "I didn't arrange this meeting to reconcile," she began, her voice steady and measured. "I didn't arrange it to hear more apologies or excuses. I arranged it to present you with your options." She slid a sleek, leather-bound folder across the table towards him. Option A. He opened it. Inside was a petition for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Attached to it were copies of the credit card statements for his secret apartment printouts of the trust documents and a highlighted copy of the prenup's family legacy clause. "That is a divorce filing," she explained coolly. "In it, I will be petitioning for sole physical and legal custody of our son, citing emotional distress fraud and a conspiracy between you and your mother to coerce me into a binding legal arrangement concerning my child under false pretenses. I will be using the evidence in that folder, your secret apartment, the financial deceit, the predatory nature of the trust your mother controls, to paint a picture of a marital environment built on lies. I will argue that you and your family are not a fit environment for a child. And given your actions, James, I think I'll win." He stared at the papers, his face pale. He looked utterly broken. "Liv, no. Please. I never wanted any of this." "You're right," she agreed, her voice cutting through his plea. "You didn't want any of this. You wanted everything. You wanted the wife and the perfect family, and you wanted Mummy's trust fund. You wanted the applause for being a modern husband while still cashing the check for being a dynastic son. The problem is you can't have both." She let the silence hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. Then she slid a second identical folder across the table. Option B. He looked at her confused before opening the second folder. Inside was a different set of documents. The first was a legal petition to change their son's name from Arthur James Sterling IV to Arlo Cole Sterling. The second was a post-nuptial agreement drafted by Kate that explicitly nullified the family legacy clause of their original prenup. It stated in no uncertain terms that all decisions regarding their child's health education and upbringing would be made jointly by Olivia and James, and by them alone. It also included a financial transparency clause requiring quarterly reviews of all family assets and liabilities to be conducted by a neutral third-party accountant. The third document was a brochure for a renowned marriage and family therapist specializing in intrusive family dynamics. Option B is the only other path forward. Olivia stated, her eyes locking onto his. It is not a path back to where we were. That place doesn't exist anymore. This is a path to something new, and it begins with these non-negotiable terms. She laid them out one by one, like a general issuing commands. First, you will sign the petition to change his name today. We will file it before we leave this building. Our son will be Arlo. He will not be a financial instrument for your mother. Second, you will sign the post-nuptial agreement. You will sever the financial and legal umbilical cord to your mother. The Arthur Trust can rot for all I care. We will live on what we earn. Your company, my gallery. If it means selling the house in Chestnut Hill and moving into a smaller place, so be it. I would rather live in a studio apartment with a man I can trust than in a mansion with a puppet. Third, you will go to your mother. You will tell her that you are your own man, that your wife and son are your primary family now, and that she will have no say in how we raise him. Her access to her grandson will be contingent on her respect for me as his mother and as your wife. And finally, Olivia's voice softened almost imperceptibly. You and I will go to counseling. We will go for a year, and you will fight every single day to earn back a fraction of the trust you shattered. You will have to prove to me that you chose me, not that you were cornered into it. She leaned back in her chair, her part said. She had laid her cards on the table. One folder represented an ending, the other a brutal, difficult, uncertain beginning. The choice was his. James stared at the two folders, his head in his hands. He was silent for a long time. The only sound in the room, his own ragged breathing. He looked up, his eyes filled with tears. She'll disown me, he whispered. The trust, the board seat, everything. She'll cut me off completely. Olivia's face was unreadable. I know, she said. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. This was the price of his betrayal. The cost of redemption. He looked at the divorce papers, at the prospect of losing his son, of having his secrets aired in a bitter court battle. Then he looked at the second folder, at the path to a life that was smaller perhaps in a financial sense, but a life that was his own. A life with a chance, however slim, to rebuild what he had broken. He slowly, deliberately closed the folder containing the divorce papers. He pushed it back across the table to her. Then, with a trembling hand, he picked up a pen, opened the second folder, and signed his name on the line at the bottom of the petition to legally change his son's name to Arlo Cole Sterling. The signature was not a magic wand. It didn't erase the betrayal or instantly mend the chasm between them. It was simply a choice, a first trembling step onto a long and treacherous path. The confrontation with Eleanor was apocalyptic. James, armed with a newfound but fragile spine, met her that evening. Olivia was not there, but Chloe later recounted the story in a hushed phone call. It happened in the grand, suffocating library of the main Sterling estate. Eleanor, expecting a report of Olivia's capitulation, was met instead with her son's declaration of independence. He told her he was changing the baby's name to Arlo. He told her he had signed a post-enup that rendered her family legacy clause impotent. He told her that her control over his family was over. Eleanor, according to Chloe, did not scream. Her fury was a far more terrifying Arctic cold. She told him he was a fool, a disappointment, and that he was throwing away his son's birthright for a woman who was common and manipulative. She informed him he was immediately removed from the family trust's board. His access to the generational wealth was severed. She ended the conversation by telling him that he was no longer her son. James came back to the house that night. Olivia had given him one of the new keys after he signed the papers, a probationary key, and he looked like a man who had survived a plane crash. He was pale, shaken, but for the first time in a long time, he looked free. He didn't try to kiss her or hug her. He simply stood in the foyer of the house that now felt too big, too opulent for them, and said, "It's done." Olivia just nodded. Okay, the weeks that followed were excruciatingly awkward. They were two strangers cohabitating in the ruins of their old life. They spoke in polite, functional sentences. Did the baby sleep? I bought groceries. Our first therapy session is on Thursday. They moved around each other with a painful courtesy, the air thick with unspoken words. They put the Chestnut Hill mansion on the market. It sold quickly to a hedge fund manager who fell in love with its soulless grandeur. The sale felt like an exorcism. They used the proceeds, along with James's now finite personal capital, from his business to buy a modest but beautiful Victorian house in Cambridge, a neighborhood that felt more like Olivia's world than his. It had a small yard, a sun-drenched room that would be her art studio, and a nursery that was a blank canvas. Together, without speaking much, they painted the room a soft, warm grey. Olivia unpacked the box of items she had hidden away. The wooden blocks, spelling DANIEL. The onesie that said Future Artist. The silver cup with the D engraving. Seeing them in this new space, this new home, built on a foundation of brutal honesty, felt like a quiet triumph. Therapy was raw. It was ugly. Olivia laid her betrayal bare, the full scope of her pain and rage. James, stripped of his family's influence and forced to confront the weakness in his own character, had no choice but to listen. He spoke of the lifelong pressure, the crushing weight of his grandfather's name and his mother's expectations. It wasn't an excuse, the therapist was quick to point out, but it was a reason. Understanding it was the first step toward changing it. Slowly, glacially, things began to shift. The change wasn't in grand gestures, but in tiny, observable moments. It was James getting up for every single night, feeding, insisting Olivia rest, telling her, "I need to do this. I need to show up." It was him actively listening to her talk about her day at the gallery, asking questions, his phone nowhere in sight. It was him one afternoon, looking at their son, their beautiful legally named son Arlo, and saying, "He looks like you. He has your eyes. Thank God." The trust was not rebuilt in a day, a month, or even a year. It was painstakingly re-earned brick by brick. The new locks on their Cambridge home were symbolic. They were chosen together. The keys were shared not as a right, but as a privilege. Their life was no longer a millionaire's fairy tale. There were no more galas at the Harvard Club. No more fawning society pages. Eleanor Sterling never spoke to them again. But what they lost in gilded cages, they gained in something far more valuable: authenticity. They were building a smaller, quieter life. But it was a life that was real. It was theirs. One evening about a year later, Olivia was rocking Arlo to sleep in his room. James stood in the doorway watching them. The silence between them was no longer awkward, but comfortable. "I love you, Olivia," he said quietly. "I know I have a long way to go to deserve to say that. But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be the man you thought I was." Olivia looked at him, at the husband she was getting to know for the second time. The love she felt was different now, less naive, more cautious but deeper in a way. It was a love that had been tested by fire and had, against all odds, survived. "I know you will, James," she said. And for the first time, she truly believed it. What you've just heard is a story of ultimate betrayal, but also one of incredible strength. Olivia's world was shattered by a single signature, a secret deal made by the man she trusted most. But instead of breaking, she fought back. She turned her pain into power, her home into a fortress, and her heartbreak into a battle plan. This story reminds us that trust is the most valuable currency in any relationship, and once broken, it takes more than apologies to rebuild it. It takes action, sacrifice, and the courage to tear everything down to build something real and lasting. What would you have done in Olivia's position? Could you ever forgive a betrayal that deep? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story moved you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who appreciates a story of strength and resilience, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more real-life drama every week. Thank you for listening.